Hi, and welcome to Well To Do podcast. I'm so excited to bring you this show. Mark Young is everything that Well To Do is about. He is our next guest, and he's a philanthropist, he's an author, he's an entrepreneur, he's even a travel nut, and the most amazing educator. And being on Well To Do and embodying all those things are basically all the things you need to know to be abundantly well. But before we introduce Mark Young, who's flown interstate for this, I'd love to share with you what I believe can help your life, because we sometimes miss out on the one thing, and that's the environmental toxin. That's where Aries Tech comes into play, and they've kindly, generously given a gift for our guest. Aries Tech has scientifically proven to help change your EMF within your home or within your working environment. Now, we have the Flex, and the Flex is got, I think, 300,000 users, and it's probably the most studied and effective protection there is when it comes to EMF or electromagnetic field and radiation. So, Mark, I am so happy to have you, and also to gift you with Life Tune from Aries Tech.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, this is yours to take. Now, I had to give you something because I've been reading your book, which is Radical Generosity, and it just continued to inspire me to do that just from the title. So congratulations.
Well, good. Thanks for having me here today, Andy. I appreciate it.
You know, I just had to have you on the show because when I met you, I guess you do embody health just in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, and you're really walking your talk. But what do you think inspired you to write such a book? Is this where health stems from? Is it from being generous and having that attitude?
You know what? That's interesting that you say that, because I'm not going to say that health inspired the writing of Radical Generosity. And it's always weird when someone says, what inspired you to write this? And I'm like, well, you know, I'm just a very generous person. Like, it's a terrible answer, right?
Isn't it?
Like,
Did you think this through?
I know, it's like, it sounds so self-promoting. No, I actually probably wrote it because I know I need to be this person.
Right.
But the reality is I think we teach best what we need to learn most.
That's profound.
And perhaps that's, you know, what inspired me to write this was it's a challenge to myself to live that life. But thank you for saying showing up right in the world. But one of the things that I loved about even writing this book, and there's an entire chapter in the book that actually talks about the physiology of generosity. And it's probably one of the things that I love most about the topic, because people think generosity and they're just like, oh, that's just giving to people. That's just giving to people. It's like, no, it's so much deeper than that. And I don't think we realize that part of our health is also our mental wealth and well-being, but also just the alignment of living in that space. Like, you can take all the NAD plus you want, you can block all the EMF you want.
Yep.
If you're just a trash can human, like, you're not going to be healthy. Like,
Right.
it's just not how that works.
True.
That we need to be, I mean, you started an introduction saying, you know, entrepreneur, educator, author, philanthropist, travel nut. It's like, and those are the words I use in my own bio. But the truth of the matter is like, we're multidimensional creatures. And I think sometimes we spend too much time getting stuck on our physical health.
Yeah.
And then there's some people who spend too much time on their spiritual health and too much time on their whatever,
Nutrition.
their
Their
nutrition.
supplements.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, we get hyper focused in an area.
Yeah.
And the reality is I think we don't spend enough time looking at the integration and the alignment with
Right.
all of those things. Like,
Yeah.
we have to be living in alignment with our own values. And I think that's where generosity has. A former pastor of mine always used the phrase, show me your calendar and show me your checkbook, and I will tell you where your priorities are.
Oh, 100%. Like, I used to say that, but about the bank statement. I'll show you where your values are when I can see where you're spending your money. So where would you spend your money? Like, I mean, for me, it's definitely not cocktails and designer handbags. So, you know, it's on travel and experiences and things like that. But what would you say you've been the most generous in? What area?
You know, in terms of generosity, I actually, in the book, I hate to go back to that, but it's like, I talk about 5 different types of dimensions of generosity.
Okay.
And financial is one.
Okay.
Like, the way that I spend my money and the people I give my money to, the causes I donate my money to.
And your time too.
All have to be in alignment with my own values. But yes, secondly, where do I spend my time? Am I volunteering? Am I giving in that way? Where am I giving my wisdom?
Generous with your advice and you're
correct.
Yeah.
Like, how am I mentoring another generation? What am I giving back? Like, what things have I learned through my businesses that I can give to other young entrepreneurs? The fourth dimension that we actually kind of neglect all the time is the generosity that we give in relationships. Like, how do you show up in a one-on-one interaction? Like, do you turn the phone over?
Are you present?
Are you present? Do you actually show up in relationships the way you need to? Because that's a generosity that can't be replaced. And I'll say, like, we talk about money and time and wisdom, and then we get to that relationship. The way that you show up, you're a mom. No one else can show up for your son in the world the way that you can. No amount of generosity from another human being can replace the type of generosity you can give to him.
Right.
And that's something that we have to make sure we're not neglecting. And then the last one I actually talk about is this idea of being generous to ourselves.
Yes.
Like, I can't give out of a cup that's drained.
No.
I have to give out of abundance and out of overflowing. And I think when we get into the health conversation so much, that I think that's where people spending too much time perhaps paying attention to themselves and not necessarily to the things around them.
See, I'm the opposite. I've been spending too much time giving to everybody and because it makes me feel good. But now I've realized I've neglected myself.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. And often it comes in boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's really where it happens. But this idea of giving, and I think it comes with that what we call the giver's high, this idea that when I'm being generous towards someone, I mean, do you realize that when you're actually even just the thought of being generous to somebody,
what does that do?
It actually gives an oxytocin release in the brain, which is the love endorphin. Like, it's the equivalent, like thinking about giving you a gift or giving you time or spending time with you actually releases oxytocin in the brain, which is the equivalent of like a 20-second hug.
Wow. So the lead up to it, the
Just the
preparation,
lead up itself.
the wrapping, the preparing, all of that. That's incredible. I love this.
Yeah, it actually gives you that type of high. And that helper's high, we call it, that it's like you're getting that type of high from it. And it literally is an endorphin release.
This is why we don't need drugs. I've never had a drug in my life. Your body can make every drug it needs.
Exactly. No one was ever born with a deficiency of that.
Now, I usually say no judgment for people who have drugs, but I'm going to outright say, like, it's really important not to, because it disrupts the nervous system, the microbiome. And every time you even take a painkiller, for example, now you're actually destroying the way the gut is absorbing micronutrition. And that's what we need to stay well. But I'm bringing this up just in context because we can't be in alignment when we're out of our body, right? So you bring in spirituality into the book as well. And that's something I think a lot of people avoid. And that's why we turn to addictions like drugs. Also, full disclaimer, if you need drugs for a certain medical condition, just letting you know, obviously work with your health practitioner. But we are usually in an addictive state when we've lost something, where there's a void of a connection to something higher than ourselves.
I agree with that. And I think there's too much that takes place. And again, we both know each other from the health and wellness space, like from this biohacking type world. And I'll say that there's two things that happen. And the one is we either end up with people that become so spiritually minded that they're somewhere in the atmosphere and no one can relate to what they're doing because, they're doing breath work in the corner.
Oh, I see.
Or you've got people that are so physiologically and biologically based that they've lost all emotional connection to everything that's going on. And I think one of my, I don't want to use the word criticisms, but an opportunity for this ecosystem is to find that balance. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious. What I mean by spiritual is like some people get way too far into the atmosphere of, and you mentioned mood altering drugs and psychedelics and this type of thing. But I think there needs to be a balance in there because again, I go back to this word alignment that happens so often, this cohesion that needs to exist in all areas of our body, that we can't be multidimensional and only focus on a couple dimensions.
So you're coming back to balance all the time. It's a balance of all the things. Because I asked you, where are you most generous? If I had to look at your bank statements, right? And I think you're probably saying in a roundabout way that it's going to be evenly spread. Is that what you're saying?
So I'm going to actually talk about the giving part, because
Yes.
when we're talking about giving from the bank statement perspective, we're
Right.
talking about financial giving specifically.
Yes.
And I think that's where most people actually derail on this topic of generosity.
But it could be like a plane ride to speak at a charity event. Yeah.
Next Monday.
Yeah. There you go.
There you
So
go. I will
it's
actually
still
be
very telling.
speaking in Michigan at a homeless, Washtenaw County homeless thing, and actually speaking to their fundraising event. But yeah, it could be flying someplace. But to me, that's more of a giving of my time. When I think of the giving of my money, something happened to me years ago, not years ago, actually, it wasn't even that long ago, but it was a challenge. It was a Tony Robbins challenge of all things.
Okay.
And it was trying to define your core values, because if we don't know exactly what our core values are, we kind of flounder around with them, and we kind of know them. But if I were to say, what are your 5 core values? You could probably give me 5 things you value. But if I challenged them or gave you 48 hours, you'd come up with other ones that you meant to mention. And it's like, yeah, but if that one was an afterthought, why wasn't it part of the core answer?
Interesting.
And it really forced me into very specific core values. And what's funny is that I found that where my money flows into those places aligns absolutely perfectly with the core values that I was able to figure out for myself. And it literally, every charity that I give to, every volunteer opportunity that I'm part of, every single one of them actually aligns with a core value of mine. And the reason why I think that's so important for people is because giving often leads to resentment.
Interesting, because there's expectation.
Sometimes because there's an expectation, but I would argue and say that the expectation is more than, well, there's 2 things. 1, do you expect more gratitude from me than I'm willing to give? Or 2, do you expect reciprocity? And in some of those cases, we end up being let down. But if I'm giving in alignment with my values, I don't expect anything in return.
Amazing.
Because the fact that I was able to give out of values, you don't resent giving something to, if your son asks you for something, you'd give it freely.
Yeah, because it's love.
Correct. So if love is one of your core values, you give to those you love, right? So I think it all boils back to that alignment with values. And to me, that's such a core thing. So yes, if you looked in my bank statement and you saw the things that I give to, you'd see I give to things like Samaritan's Purse and Operation Christmas Child and Wounded Warrior Project and Salvation Army. Like, you'd see the list of the things that I support. But I support those things because they align with who I am. And that cohesion really allows me to live in my life, right? Like, I get to live my full self and show up in the world the way I want to.
And I'm bringing all of this up and I'm deep diving into this subject of philanthropy for wellness, because it was I think it was episode 3 on Well To Do when I was talking to Mike Sherbakov, and he created Holidays with Purpose, where he would take people from San Diego across the border to Mexico, build them a flat pack house. You'd pay like $600, and at the end of that weekend, everybody would have, or the family of 4 would have a home, right? So, I learned very quickly just from observing that it is wellness. It creates wellness, because that was what was high on his values. So what is the highest value? Is it like, do we put it in order? How do we just say the 5?
Well, I'll give you mine. And I'll say that, like, my core values, the first one is love and connection.
Yep.
Like, love and connection for me is number 1. I'm relational.
Right.
The second one is actually impact. I want to know that I'm actually having an impact on the world around me and leaving
a
place.
legacy. Yeah.
Third one is whimsy. I love humor. I love laughing.
Oh my gosh, you do.
I love novelty and ridiculous things.
I'm just laughing because you told me what you put in your parents' place when they signed off on a new
Absolutely.
home.
We just
he put a photo or a painting of himself.
Oh, it's a giant wall painting that was hanging in their new home. Yeah.
So when they enter the house for the first time, there's a Leonardo da Vinci full nude. He's having so much fun.
Yeah, I just took a piece of art and had my face photo, imposed over. But it's just the funniest things. But it's like,
right,
but
it's
that
creative.
type of humor builds relationships. So that whimsy actually feeds into my value of love and connection.
Okay.
I will say generosity is, of course, one.
Okay.
And then my last one is faith.
Oh, faith. Of course. How could we forget that?
Correct. And it all lines up. And that's what I mean. Like, I absolutely love, like, this idea of generosity. To me, perhaps it was even written as a challenge to me, because I find myself nowadays, like, there are people in my life who I have just not spoken to for years. And I'm like, if I'm going to live generously, that also means generously giving forgiveness.
Wow.
And have reconciled relationships even since the publishing of the book. Because like, well, while I was writing it, actually, before it was even published, I'm like, I'm healing relationships in my own life.
Yes.
Just going, why wouldn't I?
So it's what you needed. You ramped it up for yourself because, we're mirrors, we're mirror reflections of everyone. So whilst you're teaching this, you're implementing it yourself. Sounds like when I wanted to be, I was an aerobics instructor back in like the 90s or whatever. And it was like,
Totally
I really
believe
didn't
that.
want, I don't want to exercise, but if I get paid to exercise, then I'll show up and get paid $40 for the class type thing.
That's amazing.
But like it was actually my goal. I think it was like not this New Year's Eve, but the one before. I had a whiteboard and I was in a terrible situation, financially, living, all those things. And I really just wanted to change it because it was a big move coming from Australia with 2 suitcases and a bag of Lego and a kid. And I just wanted my life the way it was, back in Australia. And, I wanted it now sort of thing. So I realized I need to get specific with values and everything. And the first thing I wrote was to be wildly generous. So I looked back at that as I was moving house because I only just moved to finally my dream home now. And it's just in alignment with, I read the book last night and, it's called Radical Generosity. I use the word wildly generous. And it's just interesting that I didn't just say I want to be more generous. I wrote that I'd like to be wildly generous. And I don't know what that meant, but now I do, because at the time I wanted it to be financial. Like I enjoy having people over, cooking for them and entertaining, and I couldn't do that, anymore in the way that I did. And now you're explaining to all of us listeners that it can happen in so many different ways, in your gifts of wisdom and all of those things. I think I was already doing that with my time and my knowledge. I just didn't do it financially, if that makes sense. So,
but one of the ways that you show up in the world, I mean, you're doing a podcast, Well To Do, and you're tapping into your relationships, you're tapping into your network so that wisdom can get shared with your listeners.
So true.
Like that's generosity. Like that is a way that you continue to do this because you know the lives that were impacted. I was a guest on a podcast. I don't know if I told you this or not. I don't believe I did. With a gentleman by the name of Barry Shore. Okay. And the guy is, he's an older gentleman who is the happiest human being I've ever laid eyes on. Like just, he's incredible. But I did a podcast with him and and he sent me an email yesterday. And his email was, I just want to show you all the comments of the people who talked about you and the things and he sent me this email with 25 comments that were left on his YouTube channel after that interview. And I was like, wow.
That's fantastic.
That's amazing. Here's a person who's literally just trying to bring joy to the world. And he has me on his podcast. And to him, he's so excited because he did a podcast with me and other people were impacted by this conversation. 100%. And I'm like, that's crazy to me. We're affecting each other in so many different ways.
And what a fun press tour to take this subject around and continually spread that. It's funny, you remind me of a time when, just before I left Australia, there was a beautiful chiropractor, Dr. John Hinwood. His message never left me because he passed. And when he was at one of the seminars, he told us a story of what he used to do. And that was that he had printed up business cards that said, expect miracles, not pray for miracles. And so he would have them in his pocket. And then when he would meet you, he'd give you a hug. And then after that, he would give you a business card. And you thought that it was his details to connect with him, but it wasn't. It was just a message,
That's
right?
So funny because Barry literally sent me an envelope with all these little inspo cards in it, rubber banded together.
Really?
I just got it. He sent me a copy of his book, and in it were all 4 or 5 stacks, 100 cards each.
Wow. They're probably the same age demographic as well, but Dr. John Hinwood said that once he made a printing error and they printed it up on paper, not cardboard. So he was like, what am I going to do with this whole box? So when he took his business suit to the dry cleaner, he said, take this box and put one in every single suit pocket. Well, he came back a month later and the owner of the laundromat or whatever it was just said to him, you cannot believe what happened. You're a client.
Wow.
Everybody came back and told me they were having miracles. I got goosebumps. Wow. They all see that ripple effect. So you're being surprised about, the 25 comments, but of course it was going to happen.
Well, I think there's something to be said there too, Andy, because I'm a big proponent of this topic of psychoneuroimmunology if we really want to get into the biohack space. But
Is that like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming?
I wouldn't say it's related to NLP in so much as the way that we speak to ourselves and we speak to our cells actually has an epigenetic expression.
Say that again, please. The way we speak.
The way that we speak to our cells. The I am statements, the most powerful words in the English
Not
language.
I'm going to be or I hope to.
Right. The I am, the declarative I ams have the opportunity to speak
to ourselves.
Life, or we have the ability to speak death. And when people use words like I am diabetic, well, what do you think your cells are hearing all day long? Like imagine that you were the CEO of this multi-department organism, right? And you showed up to work every day and told everybody we're going to go bankrupt in 6 months.
Wow.
Would your workers show up and work harder every day, or would
like
your workers just automatically shut down?
Exactly. Well, if you tell the kid you're so stupid or the dog, they become that, right?
And they become that. Mm-hmm. And I think we speak to ourselves in such negative ways. We speak so many things over ourselves. And I'm just a believer that we need to be generous in our words. Like in speaking life, and if that's an expect miracles, or if that is just speaking life over a person. I had dinner with my parents yesterday, and my stepmother made a comment about, well, I'm just old. And I went, and I'm going to tell you every time you tell me that, that those words need to leave your language because you continue to speak these types of negative things over yourself.
Wow.
And
you're such a good son.
Stop it.
You're such a good son.
I'm not.
Yes, you are. It's really important to help your mother. Mothers, like we really are selfless beings. We give our bodies and everything to our children. So to have that come back full circle, that's really beautiful that you do that for her.
Well, and it's not just for her. I would do it for you or anybody else as well. It's like I found myself like, trending is this, oh, I'm dead. Like, it's so funny, I'm dead. And you hear people using this
it's not
phrase.
cool language
and
at all.
The thing is like I found myself using those same words. Like I would
I'm
say
dying.
That. Somebody'd say, oh my, I'm dying.
I'm dying. No, you're not.
And like I literally will find myself today going, I'm not even going to say those things.
Wow.
Well,
what about the TikTok trend, right? It's my anxiety, and everybody's, singing that. And I'm like, you're programming yourself that you have anxiety.
Absolutely. 100%. The people who is like, oh, it's my PTSD. You don't
not yours.
have PTSD,
well,
first of all.
If you did, it's the struggle with but it's not
Correct.
mine. You don't own it.
Well, and we live in this thirst trap for diagnoses nowadays. Like people are trying to get diagnosed with things. I have a sister who is convinced that every autoimmune disease is going to affect her. And she's been diagnosed, quote unquote, with Hashimoto's. And I literally introduced her to my friend Amy Horniman, who is a doctor. She is a leader in thyroid function and so on. So I'm like, look, I'm going to text you. Amy's a great friend of mine. She's speaking on the topic, writing books about the topic all over the place. Like the fact that you can even get to talk to her is a privilege.
Right. Okay.
Amy group text, totally everything. I ran into Amy at a conference last month. I said, so how did it ever go when you talked to my sister? And she's like, told her everything she needed to do. And all she keeps telling me is how she's predispositioned for autoimmune disorders and tells me that she's going to have to run everything I'm saying by her doctor. I'm like, the same doctor who told her that her disease was hopeless. Mm-hmm. Yep. Like, so the doctor said it's hopeless, but you want to hold to that. Mm-hmm. Even though another doctor is telling you that you're getting wrong information and we can fix this.
Yeah. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma. We don't even know which cells it came from, but it was like,
True.
Yeah, so there's so much deep healing when it comes to that. But the awareness is half the healing because just knowing that there's something there that we should shift in our language or in our creation of, whatever it is. PTSD is a huge one. So is autoimmune. Those are two very pressing health issues at the moment. The trauma that happens, it's not so much the act, but it's how it's handled after that lives on. So it's really important to make sure that if anyone who's listening has had any kind of trauma, that they're being handled in a way that they feel supported and loved. And with the autoimmune, just wanted to drop in if anyone's having autoimmune type conditions, if they do have breast implants, to remove them because it's a contributor.
Well, and autoimmune often just means undiagnosed. Like we don't know what's going on yet. And then we classify things as autoimmune. And I think that's why so many people in the holistic functional world are going into that root cause type diagnosis, right? Like I get it that we're calling it autoimmune, but Amy's like, well, it's not autoimmune. It's actually you're having a problem being able to move T3 into T4. It's a thyroid function problem, and I can show you how to put this together. Like we need to connect the dots and get into the root cause. But once there's a diagnosis, people start speaking these declarative words now.
Well, think about it. Diagnosis and prognosis are very dangerous if you think about it. People who have been given a prognosis usually end up living out to that exact day that they've been. That's the declaration there that you're talking about.
Yep.
Whereas if we were to expect a miracle, because miracles happen every day, it's very possible that they don't end up dying when they were told, right?
Yep.
But diagnosis just means you and I still both don't know. That's what it means when you break down the Latin word. I could go, and I've written about this in my book, Connected, a paradigm shift in how we view health. I could go to the doctor and say, listen, I have these, like this sore throat, my tonsils feel inflamed. Okay, you've got tonsillitis. Inflammation of the tonsils. It's just a fancy name now for the same thing that you just told the doctor, but now here's a drug for that.
You just said it in Latin. And it's so true. And when we say this, I interviewed JJ Virgin recently on my podcast. And I loved, she was telling me the story about when her son was hospitalized and got into a really bad hit and run accident and so on. And, you know, the doctor came in, he's like, look, he's in a coma, and she's unpacking this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the horror of this, right? And going through this whole thing, net in effect, the doctor's like, you know, every hour the chances go down over the next 24 hours, you know, it's just. And her other son said, okay, well, if I'm calculating this, he's a mathematician. Well, if I'm calculating this correctly, you're telling me that there's a 0.1825% chance of survival at this point. And JJ looked at, and the doctor's like, JJ looked and she went, that's not zero.
Interesting.
And I was like, that's amazing.
That is.
And she went, so you're saying there's a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, that's the percentage I want to cling to.
Love that.
That's what we're going to do. And she's like, if a nurse, a doctor, if anybody walked into the room with any level of negativity, she's like, out.
Wow.
You're not allowed in the room.
You're not on my team. You can't sit with me.
You're not on the team. She said every time a surgeon went to work on him, there was a I'm probably misquoting this, JJ, sorry.
Yeah.
But she's like, every time a surgeon, she goes, I needed to ask, do you believe that my son will be 110% of what he was before this accident? And she said, and if the doctor couldn't say yes, I don't want you working on him.
Get a new doctor.
Yep.
Well, we all want to be on Mark Young's team. We want to be in his room. How can we find you? Because we've got the book that we can buy. And how else can we follow you?
Absolutely. The easiest thing is just check out my website. I'm at themarkyoung.com.
The Mark Young.
Themarkyoung.com. My dad was so mad that I got it first. But yeah, I'm just themarkyoung.com. Anybody's welcome to go check me out there. They can learn more about what I do for a living. But also get copies of this book, the other books I've written, and really just check out more about what I'm doing. They can follow me on Instagram, again, just the Mark Young, Twitter.
Slide into his DMs.
And you go, well.
Actually, radical generosity is a fantastic gift if you think about it, and hopefully it will inspire others to do the same and pay it forward. Follow Mark Young, and thank you so much for listening and watching Well To Do. If you loved this episode, share it like crazy. That's what radical generosity is all about. And thank you to Aries Tech for also being so generous to allow us to share our gifts of wisdom.